Have you ever wondered if you could literally reshape your entire reality just by changing how you think? What if I told you there was a man who not only claimed this was possible, but actually lived it, transforming himself from a struggling dancer in Barbados to one of the most influential spiritual teachers of the 20th century? Today we're diving deep into the extraordinary life of Neville Goddard, a man whose teachings continue to influence millions of people worldwide, from everyday seekers to Hollywood celebrities and business moguls. But here's what makes Neville's story absolutely fascinating. He didn't just teach these concepts from an ivory tower. Every single technique he shared, every principle he explained, came from his own direct experience of consciously creating dramatic changes in his life. We're talking about a man who claimed to have manifested everything from his discharge from the army to his immigration to America, simply through the power of imagination. Now, before you roll your eyes and click away, let me tell you something that might shock you. The techniques Neville taught in the 1940s and 50s are now being validated by modern neuroscience and quantum physics, but we'll get to that mind-blowing connection later. Let's start at the beginning. Neville Lancelot Goddard was born in 1905 in Barbados, the fourth of 9 children in a relatively prosperous merchant family. But here's where his story gets interesting immediately. Even as a young boy, Neville showed an unusual fascination with the power of the mind and imagination. His family owned a successful business, but Neville felt called to something completely different. At age 17, he made a decision that would change everything. He left the comfortable life his family could provide and moved to New York City with dreams of becoming a dancer and actor. Picture this: a young man from a small Caribbean island arriving in the bustling metropolis of 1920s New York with nothing but ambition and an unshakable belief in his own potential. The reality hit hard. Neville struggled as a performer, taking whatever work he could find in vaudeville shows and small theatre productions. But during this challenging period, something remarkable happened. He began studying metaphysical teachings, devouring books on mysticism, Kabbalah, and the power of consciousness. This wasn't just intellectual curiosity. Neville was desperately seeking practical tools to transform his circumstances. Then came the encounter that would define his entire life's work. In 1931, Neville met a mysterious man known only as Abdullah, an Ethiopian rabbi who claimed to be versed in ancient wisdom traditions. Now here's where skeptics might raise an eyebrow, but remember, we're dealing with Neville's own account of his life, and the results speak for themselves. Abdullah became Neville's teacher, but not in any conventional sense. Instead of lengthy philosophical discussions, Abdullah taught through direct experience. He would give Neville specific mental exercises and then challenge him to prove their effectiveness through real-world results. The most famous example involves Neville's desire to visit Barbados when he couldn't afford the trip. Abdullah instructed him to imagine he was already there, to feel the reality of being in Barbados with such intensity that it became more real than his current circumstances in New York. According to Neville, within weeks of this mental work, his family unexpectedly sent him a ticket to come home. But here's the kicker. When Neville excitedly told Abdullah about this apparent coincidence, Abdullah simply replied that it wasn't coincidence at all, but the natural result of Neville's imaginal work. This experience became the foundation for everything Neville would later teach. He spent years under Abdullah's guidance, testing and refining techniques for what he called conscious creation through imagination. But Neville wasn't content to simply learn these methods. He wanted to understand the deeper principles behind them. During World War II, Neville faced another major test of his beliefs. He was drafted into the army, but he desperately wanted to return to his family and continue his spiritual work. Instead of accepting his fate, Neville applied his techniques with laser focus. He would lie in his army barracks each night, imagining himself honorably discharged and back home with his wife. He made this mental scene so vivid and emotionally charged that it felt completely real. The result? Within weeks, he received an unexpected discharge that military officials later admitted they couldn't fully explain. This experience convinced Neville beyond any doubt that consciousness was the fundamental creative force in the universe. By the 1940s, Neville began sharing his discoveries publicly. His lectures in New York and Los Angeles drew massive crowds. But what set him apart from other spiritual teachers of his era was his practical approach. Neville didn't just talk about abstract spiritual concepts. He gave people specific, step-by-step methods for reshaping their lives. His core teaching was deceptively simple, yet profound. He claimed that imagination was God, that the human imagination was literally the creative power of the universe operating through individual consciousness. According to Neville, when you imagine something with sufficient intensity and feeling, you're not just daydreaming. You're actually creating that reality in what he called the fourth dimension, from where it must eventually manifest in the physical world. But Neville's approach went deeper than positive thinking or visualization. He taught people to identify completely with their desired outcome, to live mentally in the reality they wanted to create. His famous technique, called the state akin to sleep, involved relaxing the body while keeping the mind focused on a specific imaginal scene that implied the fulfillment of one's desire. What makes Neville's story even more compelling is how he lived these principles throughout his life. He manifested his immigration to America, his successful lecture career, his marriages, even specific material possessions, all through what he called revision and assumption. When faced with undesirable circumstances, instead of accepting them as permanent, he would mentally revise them, imagining a different outcome until that became his experienced reality. The scientific community initially dismissed such ideas as wishful thinking, but modern research in neuroplasticity and quantum mechanics is revealing mechanisms that support many of Neville's claims. Scientists now understand that vivid mental imagery activates the same neural networks as actual experience, effectively rewiring the brain and influencing behavior in ways that can create real-world changes. Neville continued lecturing and writing until his death in 1972, leaving behind a body of work that continues to influence people across all walks of life. His books and recorded lectures remain popular today, inspiring everyone from entrepreneurs to artists to ordinary people seeking to transform their circumstances. What makes Neville Goddard's life truly remarkable isn't just what he taught, but how he lived. He demonstrated that with sufficient understanding and application of mental principles, any person can become the conscious creator of their own experience, transforming not just their external circumstances, but their fundamental understanding of what it means to be human.